Thank you so much for joining today's session. So basically, this workshop will talk about the theme of equity and its relationship to the Sustainable Development Goals. So the main topics to be discussed are what are the SDGs, the differences between equity and equality, what the United Nations is doing to achieve equity, actions that can be taken in order to ensure equity, and a description of an action campaign organized by MUN Impact, the 100K Leads Challenge. Our aim is basically to discuss different viewpoints on the topic and highlight the idea that all actions count to achieve the 2030 agenda. We hope that at the end of the session, everyone will be able to ask questions and express their opinions. So without further delay, I'm going to hand it over to the presenters.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our workshop on equity. Today, we're going to be discussing the differences between equity and equality.
Just 1 second, I'll start sharing my screen. Right. Hey, everyone, I'm Meera Ranjan. Adding on to what Maria said, we will be having an interactive segment during our session, as well as a Q&A section where you will be able to ask us any question you have. So throughout the session, whenever you get any question, please drop them in the chat box and we'll be answering them at the end.
Thank you very much, everyone, for choosing this workshop, and we hope you enjoy it.
Right, so let us look at the things that we'll be discussing today. During the first part of the session, we will be discussing the topic of today's session, that is, what is equity? Then we'll be discussing about the SDGs, what they are and how they're going to help us. Then we're going to talk about the difference between equity and equality. Now, I'm sure many of you would have heard equality, but we're going to see the difference between these two terms. After that, we will be looking at why the UN is working towards this and what the UN has been doing to ensure equity.
And in the next half of the presentation, we're going to be taking a closer look at a community initiative for equity and what you can do in your own communities to further equity, as well as the 100K Leads Challenge.
Right, so about us, the presenters. Hey everyone, I am Meera Ranjan and I'm a 16-year-old student living in Chennai, India. I'm an ardent supporter of the SDGs. I'm heading MUN Impact's 100K Leads Challenge in India. The 100K Leads Challenge is an initiative that we'll talk about towards the end of today's presentation, so make sure you don't miss that out. Some other things about me are that I love cats. I have many pet cats at home. I play the keyboard. I like to play badminton too. So I think that's a pretty good summary about who I am. Now over to Maria.
Thank you very much, Meera. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Egea, and I'm a 17-year-old student from Spain. I'm currently the head of the Europe region for the 100K Leads Challenge. And in my free time, I really like reading, discussing politics, and hanging out with my friends. Okay, so to start off the presentation, firstly, we will talk about what equity is. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, equity is the situation in which everyone is treated fairly and equally. So let's move on to the next part. What are the SDGs? The Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDGs or the Global Goals, were adopted by the United Nations in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030, people all around the world enjoy peace and prosperity. The 17 SDGs are integrated, which means that they recognize that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. In 2015, world leaders agreed to 17 global goals, which are now officially known as the Sustainable Development Goals. It's now 5 years on from when they were adopted, and we have more work than ever to do. These goals have the power to create a better world by 2030 by doing different things like ending poverty, fighting inequality, and addressing the urgency of climate change.
The SDGs, as has been said before, is a collection of interconnected goals. The mission statement developed by the United Nations says that the SDGs are a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The purpose of the SDGs is to provide us with a set of universal goals that will help us combat urgent environmental, political, and economic challenges facing our world. Guided by these goals, it is now up to us, people, governments, businesses, civil society, and the general public to work together to build a better future for everyone. Now, let's look at a lovely quote from the Secretary General at the time the SDGs were created, Ban Ki-moon. He described the SDGs as a roadmap to ending global poverty, building a life of dignity for all, and leaving no one behind. It is also a clarion call to work in partnership and intensify efforts to share prosperity, empower people's livelihoods, ensure peace, and heal our planet for the benefit of this and future generations. I don't think anybody can sum up the importance of the SDGs in our world better than Mr. Ban Ki-moon. So I hope everybody understands how essential the SDGs are for our world. So here are the 17 SDGs outlined by the UN. These came into force with effect from 1st January 2016. Though not legally binding, the SDGs have become de facto international obligations and have the potential to reorient domestic spending priorities of countries within the next 15 years. The 2030 agenda of the UN on the SDGs underscored that quality, reliability, and disaggregated data will be needed to measure the progress of the targets of the SDGs to ensure that no one is left behind. When we progress together. This agenda intends to counteract global problems such as poverty, inequality, climate, environmental degradation, and injustice.
Thank you for that, Mira. So often many people kind of mistake what equality and equity mean. To make sure that in this workshop we understand what we're talking about, we're going to establish the difference between these two terms. So let's look at each of their definitions. Firstly, let's see what equality is defined as. Again, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, equality is defined as the right of different groups of people to have a similar social position and receive the same treatment. Equity, as we saw in the previous slides, is described as the situation in which everyone is treated fairly and equally. At a first glance, these two words seem very, very similar. So let's look at what the George Washington University Milken Institute of Public Health says is the slight distinction. According to them, an equitable solution would allocate the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome.
While theoretically the concept of equality means that everybody gets the same thing, the reality is that not everybody needs the same thing. For those who have been long harmed in an unequal system, for example, women, Black people, indigenous, people of color, people with disabilities, poor and working class folks, it is more important that people get what they need rather than getting the same as others. In order to understand the concept and practice of equity, it is essential to first understand that not everybody starts at the same place. For example, let's consider a running race. What isn't obvious is that some of those runners may have been given the opportunity to enter the race, train with great coaches, and to practice with other fast runners. Because they train with the best people, they're set up to succeed, and they do. However, imagine a situation where someone has talent, but he or she doesn't have the resources. Maybe he even enters the running arena, but he doesn't have the money to afford a great coach, and hence he's at a disadvantage. So that is the first thing to understand. The next thing is that without taking into consideration the different circumstances from which someone enters a situation, it's hard to actually achieve equality because every individual is inherently different. So when it comes to fairness and setting up children for success, varying needs need to be taken into consideration. So equity is basically the idea of leveling the playing field. Equality treats everyone the same without paying any attention to the natural differences between people, such as gender, race, social classes, and more. Let us take an analogy to understand equity better. Now, everybody learns differently, right? Some of us prefer auditory learning, while others prefer visual learning and have to see things to understand them. If a teacher teaches something in only one style, it will favor those students who prefer that method, right? They will understand it better. While it's equal because everybody gets the same treatment, it is not equitable because some students may prefer a different teaching style and may understand something better. So that is the difference between equity and equality. Let us look at some examples of equity in real life. First, the health sector. Health equity, according to the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, would mean that every person, regardless of their social position, has what they need to attain his or her full health potential. However, if we consider people in different socioeconomic groups and races, they are disproportionately affected by diseases. For example, those in poverty have a higher chance of developing a chronic disease. The widening inequality between the rich and the poor when it comes to health is a clear case of why equity and equality, why the difference between equity and equality is important. It can make the difference between life and death, especially in the health sector. Next, let's look at an example in public policy. Let's consider a public policy where the government decides to cut back on operating hours of recreational areas and libraries. In this case, if the local government approaches this situation equally, then they would cut the hours in all the libraries, they would cut the working hours of all the libraries, but there is a chance that in some localities, the less wealthy neighborhoods would visit these public places more often than the rich neighborhoods who go to private libraries and private recreational areas. So an equitable approach would be to check where in which neighborhoods there are frequent visits to libraries and recreational areas and make sure that the hours are longer there and cut back on places where people don't visit the libraries so often. That is an equitable approach now. Next, when we look at education, by prioritizing equity over equality, educators will be in tune to their students' needs and provide resources to overcome their specific challenges. So equity versus equality in education is very important to understand. Equality means every student gets the same experience, but equity goes even further to remove any discrimination of group and provide benefits according to the needs of the students. Now, equity and equality are both directed towards promoting fairness of treatment among people, though the modus operandi they follow are different. Let us look at the SDGs which are related to equity. They are SDG 2, Zero Hunger, SDG 3, Good Health and Well-being, SDG 4, Quality Education, SDG 5, Gender Equality, SDG 10, Reduce Inequalities, and SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. Why are these SDGs related to equity? Well, let's see. A single rule or policy might not suit everybody's need. Let's take an example. For example, in India, where I live, the government has a food program that has various types of food ration schemes, depending on a family's income that supports everyone, even those who can't afford quality food. And this is an example of equitable access to food. Here there is a picture on the screen that shows the ration cards of the state of Rajasthan, which is in India. There are three types of cards which are called APL, BPL, and one more. APL stands for above poverty line, BPL stands for below poverty line. So based on these, people get food at a subsidized rate, and the people who are above the poverty line get the food at the normal rate. Therefore, this ensures that the government does not get too much of loss. Also, the people who are below poverty line get access to food. So this is an example of equity. Let's consider all other SDGs are equality-based goals. For example, SDG 6, which is clean water, and SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. These are resources that every human being needs, irrespective of any distinguishing factor. They need to be equal for everybody, and there is really no need for an equitable policy here. So these are the SDGs. At this point, we have a quiz lined up for you all. Since I think we've talked a lot about the difference between equity and equality, we should be equipped enough to decide which situation is an equitable situation and which is an equality situation. So we have a fun quiz prepared for you. Let's share that right now. Right. Maria, do you want to start us off?
Yes, sure. So we're going to be reading out different scenarios, and we'd like you to write in the chat box whether you think it fits in better with equity or equality. Okay, so let's look at the first one. An organization that addresses hunger and ensures that seats on the board of directors are reserved for people most impacted by hunger and food insecurity. So now have a think and write down in the chat box whether you think that's equity or equality. Okay, so I see that most people have written equity in the chat box. Mira, would you like to press the button?
Right. So yes, the audience is correct. It's equity. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, next example. Same salary, benefits, and rewards to all of the employees, irrespective of the difference in their work performance. What do you think, equity or equality? Okay, so I see everybody has written equality in the chat box, and you would be correct. Now let's look at the third example. Arranging extra classes for all the students irrespective of their exam grades, marks, and classroom or school performance. What do you think, equity or equality? Okay, so I see most people have answered equality. Let's have a look.
Right, I think the majority is equality. So the people who told equality, you're right. Next one, arranging extra classes and giving special attention to the academically weak student in order to improve his or her education and classroom or school performance. So is this equity or equality? Can we have some more responses?
Most people have replied equity.
Right. That's absolutely correct because it caters to the specific need of the student. So it's equity. Next one, giving equal quantity of food to all the family members, including pregnant women and adolescents, irrespective of their nutritional requirement and need. So what do you think? Okay.
Most people are going with equality.
Yep. You're right. A school that has a discipline program policy which takes into account how the stress and trauma of hunger, poverty, and racism impact kids.
Is that equity or equality?
Okay, I see a lot of equity in the chat box. Right, it is equity, absolutely. Because the school is understanding the specific needs of the students again and they're catering to them. So yeah, this is definitely equity. Wow, I think our audience got it all right, right, Maria?
Yes, they've done very well.
Awesome. So after this, I think what we can say is, well done, audience. I think you all did a great job. I'm so happy that you all understood this concept. So yeah, clapping is in order for all of you. Applause. Let's move on.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next part of our presentation. Most of you must be wondering why the UN is concerned about working towards equity when normally we are most used to seeing the United Nations aiming to achieve things like global peace, for example. So let's look at some infographics developed by UNICEF and see why the UN is working towards this goal. If you look at the graph that's on the screen, you can read the small text below says, rural children are more likely to die before the age of 5 than those for cities. So this information comes from a report developed by UNICEF called Advantage or Paradox: The Challenge for Children and Young People Growing up Urban. So sorry, the main takeaways from this report are that rural children are 1.7 times more likely to die before the age of 5 than those from urban areas like the cities. And as we're going to be talking about later, this isn't the only disadvantage that rural children face. If you take that into context, this means that 13.4 million poor children living in the countryside are less likely to complete primary school than their urban counterparts. We're going to be looking at another example now. Again, according to some UNICEF statistics, the richest women in the world are 3 times more likely to give birth with a skilled attendant than the poorest. This data, just like that, seems very abstract. So let's have a look at what this means in practice. So worldwide, the child mortality rate has decreased globally from 14,000 dead children a day to 7,000 a day in 2018. Um, and while having medical attention at birth does help explain why child mortality rates are much lower in more economically developed countries, MEDCs, than children who are born in less economically developed countries, LEDCs. Now we're going to be looking at some more specific initiatives that the UN has to work towards equality. One of the UN's bodies, which is working to achieve equality, is UNICEF. And UNICEF stands for the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, which provides help to children worldwide. For example, UNICEF USA boasts an initiative that aims to bring innovative educational solutions to some of the world's most vulnerable children. As they explain themselves in their mission statement, the organization wants to sharpen the equity focus in all of its programs. To do so, they are trying to focus on helping the children who are least well off instead of those who have regular access to education. Some recent examples of actions that they have put in place uh, throughout the equity initiative Let Us Learn include, for example, ensuring that Afghani girls have a second chance at completing primary school through some accelerated learning programs so they can try and catch up with the other children, or creating multiple pathways to learning for out of school minority children in Nepal. Those children are actually participants of the Let Us Learn initiative. So now we're going to be talking about a different initiative that aims to achieve equality, this one led by UNICEF and the European Union. Their motto is for every child to have a fair chance in life. And together, these two groups are making sure that all children, irrespective of where they come from, reach their full potential through educational equity. You might be wondering why UNICEF has partnered with the European Union, but this actually makes a lot of sense because the partnership is mutually beneficial as it allows UNICEF to have some input in the creation of budgets and allocation of resources given by the EU. The EU is a political bloc and it raises its money, among other means, by having its member states allocate a section to fund its activities in their budgets. And then they use a portion of this money to to invest in different philanthropic or charitable missions. In the promotional material, Equity UNICEF European Union determines that their main goal is to focus on the education of girls, by prioritizing their unique needs and focusing on 5 different interlinked areas to tackle some of the most pressing issues they face. And to try to prioritize their unique needs, they have outlined 5 main priorities. The first one is to end child marriage and protect girls from multiple risks that limit their life opportunities. They also want to advance girls' secondary education with a focus on STEM skills, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. They're also promoting gender responsive adolescent health, including nutrition, pregnancy prevention and care, and HIV or HPV prevention. The fourth way they're doing this is by supporting menstrual health and hygiene. And the final goal is to prevent and respond to gender based violence, particularly in humanitarian settings. Now that we've looked at some past equity initiatives, we're going to be moving on to arguably the most famous equity initiative at the moment. So currently, the WHO, Gavi, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness are leading the COVAX initiative. And you might already know, but in case you don't, the COVAX initiative aims to share vaccines against COVID-19 among the world's population. So we're going to be looking at some statistics now so you can understand why equity is deemed very important. The poorer countries in the world have only vaccinated around 2% of the population yet, while 11 billion, while some of the richer countries have already delivered almost 4 billion vaccines. If you're wondering how many vaccines are needed to protect 70% of the world's population, that would be 11 billion vaccines. The idea is that through the COVAX initiative, some of the poorer countries in the world would be able to receive vaccines to vaccinate 20% of their population by the end of 2021, especially their healthcare workers and those most at risk. Right now, the figure stands at around 2%. The hope for the WHO is that COVAX will help rebuild economies and end what is considered the worst part of the pandemic that we are still currently going through. On the screen is a quote from the current Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, and this is what he has to say about COVAX, the UN Vaccine Equity Initiative. The rollout of COVID-19 vaccines is generating hope. At this critical moment, vaccine equity is the biggest moral test before the global community. Here's some more information about the COVAX initiative. It was originally created to help 92 low and middle income nations, and it is being funded by the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment. On the screen, on the first image, you can see the governments which are donating the most money to COVAX, and as of April 2021, the governments donating the most are the United Nations, Germany, the United Kingdom, the European Union, Sweden, Japan, Canada, and Saudi Arabia. And on the other graph, you can see the different countries which are participating. Those in yellow are the low and middle income countries which will be able to receive the COVID vaccines through the initiative.
Great. So now that we've looked on some awesome examples that are working on a global level to ensure equity, let us look at how equity can be achieved by people like us, communities, right? So the best way is to learn from a good thing in the past and try to implement it in the future, right? So I'm going to talk about an initiative called the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, abbreviated as DSNI. So I'll be referring to it as DSNI from now on. And the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative is a non-profit, community-driven organization located in Boston, Massachusetts in the USA. Established in 1984, The mission of this organization is to empower Dudley residents to organize, plan for, create, and control a vibrant, diverse, and a high-quality neighborhood in collaboration with community partners. One of the DSNI's distinguishing strengths is its focus on channeling individual concerns into a collective voice to achieve shared goals and facilitate community empowerment. From what I've just said, it is explicitly clear that DSNI is an example of equity in a community, right? So let us look at the different initiatives and programs that they have to ensure equity in the neighborhood. The first one is called the Community Land Trust, CLT. Community land trusts are non-profit organizations that own land and lease it out for mission-aligned uses. So in the neighborhood, there was a lot of land that was not being used. The residents, instead of putting it on the market, allowing a company to build a factory or something, they decided to handle this land themselves and remove it from the speculative market and protect it for community use. That is, they decided to build parks, open space, affordable homes, rental housing, farm sites, affordable commercial space, and community gardens. CLTs are governed by groups of people who make decisions about how the land is used for community benefit. And they're governed by groups of people who are basically residents of the neighborhood. So they know what kind of construction they want on that land. So this is an example of equity. The next one is the Boston Promise Initiative. Now, this program was funded through the US Department of Education. The initiative is intended to support families, schools, neighborhoods in ensuring that every child has cradle to career opportunities to succeed through access to quality education, social support systems, and safe environments. The Boston Promise Initiative has developed and implemented several small initiatives to achieve many of these outcomes, many of which emphasize teen involvement in youth education. So this is a very promising initiative related to education inequity. The next one is related to employment. DSNI works to increase employment opportunities for residents of racial, ethnic minority backgrounds, women of racial ethnic minority backgrounds through the Dudley Workforce Collaborative. The Dudley Workforce Collaborative supports businesses and developers to increase the number of construction work hours offered to residents in these marginalized groups. They also ensure that working safety protocols are followed in all the labor sectors. The next sphere that we're going to look at is health. DSNI has developed and implemented a range of community initiatives to address the social determinants of health. Many of these initiatives are operated through partnerships with a range of other community stakeholder organizations. Several of their initiatives focus on specific, more vulnerable populations within the community. So they give special attention to them, and everybody has good access to health. Now that we've looked at the different spheres that DSNI has worked to improve, there are many more. Actually, if you read about DSNI on the internet, there are many other spheres, like they have improved public safety in the neighborhood, they've improved housing, and a lot of other things, out of which I just chose the most important ones. So now that we have seen an example, let's see what we learn from it. Learnings from the DSNI. Well, the first step to ensure equity is to understand demographics and people's needs. This is very important so that every voice in the community is heard. Equity is based on giving people what they need. Hence, understanding demographics and people's issues will really help. The next step is to take this information comprising of the demographics and people's needs and use it to improve education and health systems. Equity initiatives, I think, can also be called as customized equality initiatives. Won't you agree? Localized efforts can be a good starting point for implementing equity. Rather than starting on a large scale, when we implement equity on localized areas, we can learn from the mistakes that we make, the possible mistakes that we're doing, and make them better, solve those problems before implementing equity on a large scale. And we can see how well it has worked out for this neighborhood. Of course, making governance inclusive is very important. This means that there will be representation of every society while taking policy decisions. Again, supporting equity. Youth are the future leaders of the world, and hence including youth in community initiatives is very essential, as youth can help mobilize support for any cause in the community. And involving youth in equity initiatives specifically will prepare them for the future and steer them towards ensuring equity in the world. So these are the learnings that we've got. Now, we have collated some ideas of what you can do to ensure equity in your community, right? These deeds, I'm going to call them good deeds, okay, because they're good things that we're going to do for the society. And these good deeds are from our initiative, 100K Deeds Challenge, which we'll be talking about in some time. So what can you do? Bring about awareness in the classroom, university, and workplace about equity. Like we are telling you today about what equity and equality is teach others. Involve yourself in community initiatives. Like we saw in many of the DSNI initiatives, youth were involved in most of them. So when we involve ourselves in community initiatives, it helps greatly. Go one step further and campaign for the government policies that support equity. So this is definitely something you can do. Tutor a friend who is having difficulties with the school subject. Thereby, you're actually furthering equity because you're helping someone who needs something more than the actual classroom, right? Next, organize a donation drive for quarantine supplies, such as face masks, toilet paper, hand sanitizer to distribute among those in need. You can also offer mentorship opportunities for disadvantaged youth. If someone in your school, workplace, or community has concerns or needs that need to be addressed, it could be any type of issue based on gender, race, or any educational issue, support them and guide them towards finding help. Become their voice. If they can't raise their concerns, raise it for them. Moreover, in group projects, ensure that all your team members have an opportunity to display their strengths. Make sure that you include equity in all your group projects.
So perhaps during the workshop, you might have been wondering why equity is relevant to your own life. Because yes, it's very interesting to learn about new concepts, but how can we apply them to our everyday realities? So to try and answer this question, let's look at a recent controversy in the application of this concept, equity in the workplace. While proponents argue that equity is a way to right historical wrongs, critics counter that attempting to implement equity in the workplace has some very severe drawbacks. Now we're going to be looking at what these drawbacks are. Firstly, it's the question of the ability to find hires. Critics of DI, which means diversity, inclusivity, and equity, argue that it's not always possible to hire people proportionally to a group's prevalence in the workplace, as ethnicity or gender are not factors which determine a person's interest or aptitude in any given activity. Secondly, we have the consideration of the meritocracy. Lots of people object to focusing on gender, race, ethnicity, or any other factors instead of performance or talent when trying to hire somebody new to a workforce. Critics argue that job vacancies should be filled taking only aptitude for the task into account. Furthermore, they state that it exacerbates resentment and frustration between the different people who are already working in the company, as it can be sometimes viewed as discrimination trying to fix other discriminations. And finally, we have financial solvency. If all employees are considered equal, regardless of the role that they play in the company's activities or the role that they're doing when they work, an argument could be made that they should get paid equally. And some people believe, taking into account the way that we know markets work, this reduces incentives to work harder, as well as diminishes motivation. Because if you know that somebody else who perhaps doesn't have as much responsibility as you, if they get paid more than you might feel like you may lose your motivation to carry on trying to work hard. And the consequence for this could be seen as negative for output and for the workplace as a whole.
So as we have already explored before, there are multiple views on the issue of equality. So let us look at some possible roadblocks to achieving equity. The first one is defining ideas of fairness and justness, which are based on moral values or consideration. What one person thinks is fair may differ markedly from what another thinks is fair, right? For example, take the quota system. Some seats are reserved for people from a particular group. But the question that could arise in our mind is, does this reservation take away one seat from a person who might have deserved to get that place, although he or she doesn't belong to the reserved group? So that is a question that we need to think about. The next one is, where can we draw the line between these two concepts, right? Equity and equality. It seems like they're almost same, but there is a significant difference if we understand it. Well, another roadblock discusses what equity is to a country. Countries always focus upon ensuring equality for all their citizens. So does it go against the principles of countries then? That is something we need to think about as well. Well, the next one is actually quite a famous one. Is equity just another form of discrimination or marginalization? Because think about it, we are basically identifying groups of people who need something else, and then we are giving them something more that they need, right? So we are segregating them basically. Could this be discrimination? Would this be good? As a result of this, could it create stigma against a certain group that gets more benefits? Well, these are all questions that we are still pondering over, but we hope that our workshop will help you think about these questions and help you make up your mind.
Now we're going to be talking about the initiative that Mira was discussing earlier, the 100K Deeds Challenge. So what is the 100K Deeds Challenge? The 100K Deeds Challenge is a youth-driven initiative which is run by MUN Impact, a non-profit organization which launched in 2017, also the organizers of this event. It is currently managed, the 100K Deeds Challenge is currently managed by over 150 students from all around the world, including over 50 student translators who are working very hard to make sure that this challenge is accessible to all, regardless of where they come from or the language that they speak. This challenge was created to raise awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which we discussed earlier, for aspiring young people from schools, universities, or offices now that the Decade of Action to achieve the 2030 Agenda has officially started.
Right. So now let's look at how can you participate in the 100K Deeds Challenge. As María said, the 100K Deeds Challenge is a challenge where we ask people to do good deeds for the society, improve the world any way you can, and record those deeds on our website. So the first step is to download the toolkit from our website, which is 100kdeeds.org. The toolkit is basically a document on our website where you will be able to find a list of deeds that you can do. They are separated by SDG and by age group. So whichever age group you are, you can perform as many deeds as you like from whichever SDG you are passionate about. The toolkit is available in a lot of languages, so language is not a barrier. The next step is to obviously submit your deed. Tell us about your good work. You will only have to fill out a form with a description of your deed and maybe post a picture if you want to. So those are the two steps. Download the toolkit from our website, 100kdeeds.org, and then submit your deeds. The third step is to register for the challenge and join our mailing list to get regular updates. Now, step 4 is perhaps the most exciting part of it. Whenever you submit a deed, you will be able to see your deed as a small dot on the map that we have on our website. This is basically to give an idea of the impact that small deeds can make on the world. So this is definitely an incentive for you to get started doing good deeds for the world.
If all of this seems intriguing to you, please visit the following sites. They've already been sent to you on the chat by Angela, our admin. You can reach out to us using any of those handles on the different platforms. And you can also watch the promotional video, which has the link at the very bottom. If you have any questions about the 100K Deeds Challenge, please do let us know and send us an email, and we'd love to get back to you.
Right. So the deeds are in the chat box. You could probably copy them and keep them somewhere, or you could visit our website 100kdeeds.org and navigate from there. Right. So let me move on.
Now we're going to be looking at a couple of past deeds that have been submitted in the past related to equity. So let's have a look at the first deed. Somebody uploaded this and it reads, our school donated books and stationery items to an underdeveloped school. Around 30 people were involved and it took place in a village in Punjab, India. The second deed is, I've participated in a charity that donated the money to an organization called Boyo, which helps children who are born in low-income families to have an opportunity to learn and study. And now finally, the third deed. 3 students presented a PowerPoint to younger students explaining the idea behind a school-wide fundraiser, Bolderie, which consists on students paying the normal price for a school meal, but only receiving a bowl of rice. The money saved goes to our sister school in Lebanon, which was demolished in the Beirut explosion. After the presentation, the students carried out a Zoom call with teachers and students at the Lebanese school, where they explained their needs and what the money would be spent on: school equipment and renovation work.
Right. So if you're interested about the content from our presentation or would like to read more, here are the sources, and how you can get these sources is basically type learn about equity versus equality in Google. You can read about a lot, and you could probably get inspired by reading about the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, DSNI. That would give everyone a great insight into what equity is. So these are our websites.
Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this workshop. We hope that you have enjoyed this session as much as we have, and that it will give you plenty of food for thought.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to us. We hope that we have provided you with something alternative to equity, which has a lot of potential to improve society, right? So we'll now be proceeding with the Q&A session, where we'll be answering any questions related to the topic discussed today, either the 100K Deeds Challenge or today's equity presentation. Once again, thank you for attending.
I just want to say a huge thank you to Maria and Mira for having this amazing presentation on equity versus equality. We do have a couple of questions, and I would just like to read them out for you guys, and you guys can answer it. The first question we have is, how do we initiate gender, religion, and race equality and equity in school level or in school grounds?
Right, so I'll go with that question. So we discussed in our presentation, right, what you can do, right? Whenever somebody feels like there is a stereotype in the class, or maybe some teaching content is kind of offensive to somebody in your class, raise your voice and make sure that your teachers know about that. And whenever you do group projects, make sure that whatever content you make, it is representative. It does not reflect any stereotypes or does not discriminate anyone. So those are ways, and make sure that there is an equal balance of girls and boys in the activities in the class. These are all things that you can do to ensure equity. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Mira. We also have another question. This is in regards with the 100K Deeds Challenge. The question is it possible to sign up for the 100K Deeds Challenge as a school, or does it have to be an individual?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. You can register as an individual if you'd like, but if you believe that your school would be interested in taking part in the 100 KD challenge, please get in touch with one of your teachers, because teachers can also register either their classes or the whole school to participate in the challenge. If the person who asked this question could tell us which region they're located in, we could give you the details of the head of that region so that you can contact them directly. North America region? Okay, so that would be Catherine. I will send you her MUN Impact email account so that you can send her an email and get in touch with her directly, if you give me a minute.
Right,
Thank
so
you so much.
any more questions?
Also, Meera and Maria have shared a Google Forms to fill out as like a feedback for the session. So if you guys would fill it out, it will mean a lot to all of us. Also, please feel free to turn on all of your cameras because I will be needing a screenshot of the session. So if you guys want to give me your best poses in 3, 2, 1. I'm just gonna take like one more for good measure. Thank you so much, guys.